Welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm your host, S.L. Canthan. We bring in perspectives that you do not see in the mainstream media. Today, we have a remarkable guest, Mr. Larry Johnson, who used to be with the CIA and the State Department. So that's the deep state, if you will.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, I was part of it.
So we are very glad to have this opportunity to chat with him and to learn from him. Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you for the invitation.
So the first question I have is, when people think of the CIA, they think of the Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise or James Bond sort of life.
Yeah.
So what did you do with the CIA, and why did you decide to join it in the first place?
Well, let's start with deciding to join. I needed a job, and I was interested in international affairs, and I didn't feel like taking the Foreign Service exam. And at that time, I guess I was 29. It seemed like an exciting thing to try to do, not fully understanding what it was. But I joined in September of '85. I was part of what they called a career trainee class. There were 53 of us. And at that time, there were 4 directorates in the CIA: operations, analysis, science and technology, and admin. So there were representatives of all 4 of those directorates in my class. And one of my classmates at the time was Valerie Plame. She's become somewhat famous. Also, this kid named Steve Hall. Steve was one of the 51 intelligence officials who claimed that the Hunter Biden laptop was possible Russian disinformation. I've been around people like that. My job, once I completed the year of training, was to work as an analyst. And I was in the Central America branch. I was the Honduran analyst. This was during the height of the wars in Central America. So I wound up having a very busy, active caseload.
I mean, so this was like during the Nicaragua, the Contras and all of that?
Right. All the Contra business. I mean, I met Oliver North. I met Fawn Hall, his secretary. She was much more attractive than he was. So, and dealt with, during my first year of training, I worked on the Central American Task Force during what they called an internship, 8 weeks of exposure. So I worked on the operations side of the house too. But this was when, the United States was claiming that the Soviet Union was trying to take over Central America, and we had the civil wars raging in Salvador and Guatemala, and then Nicaragua.
Wow. What a fascinating time. And then you saw the fall of the Soviet Union. So why did you decide to leave the CIA and go to the State Department?
The managers were terrible. They had harbored suspicions, I found out after 2 months, that I was, quote, cooking the intelligence that I had, because every morning they asked us to prepare a group of cable traffic. And back then, this was, in the Stone Age, before, we had computers, but everything was done in paper. So every morning when I came in, I would have to sit down and read through a stack of papers about this thick, which were messages sent either by embassies overseas or by intelligence reports generated from CIA or from the National Security Agency or the Defense Intel, all of this intelligence. I had to go through there and find out what was important and what wasn't. And so I'd put together a list of cables and send it forward. Unbeknownst to me, my branch chief, who was brand new, she came out of Africa. She didn't know a thing about Central America, not a thing about the cultures and the activities there. But she was picking out her own cables that she thought were important, and those go to the front office. Well, they were, they represented two completely different point of views because she didn't know what she was doing. The management at no point came to me to say, "Hey, Larry, well, why is this? We've got this difference." Instead, they waited till it was time to do my annual evaluation. It did, and at that time I was in top 10% of analysts in terms of what they called current production, and I had written a hard copy, and I checked all the boxes that you needed to get promoted. And when I walked in and said, "Well, we're not promoting you because we've got questions about the integrity of your analysis," and I blew up. I was livid because they should have come and talk to me about that. I could show you. I've got hanging on my wall. So people say, "Oh, he's just a disgruntled guy. He left the agency because he's not as good as he said he was." Well, I can show you on my wall. I've got 2 exceptional performance awards that were given to me my last year at CIA. So if I was such a crappy analyst, why did they give me 2 exceptional performance awards? So I was fed up. And just by coincidence, part of my job is by that time I was the regional analyst for Central America. And one of my jobs was to regularly brief Ambassador Morris Busby, who AKA is known as Buzz. Buzz was the special envoy for the Central American peace process. So I would regularly brief him, and he would just got a new job as the coordinator for counterterrorism. And when he found out that I was, going to bail out of CIA, he said, "Hey, come work for me," which I did. So things turned out well. I'm actually in a way grateful to the two ladies who were in charge of the Middle America Caribbean division for being such terrible managers. Because were it not for their terrible management, I might have stayed there and been stuck at CIA. Instead, I got out and got to see the world.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the track record of these people over the last few decades. It's been like failure after failure after failure. And then they have the balls to say that, "Oh, Mr. Larry Johnson didn't do a good job."
Well, there's a book by Tim Weiner called Legacy of Ashes, and it does it lays out that indictment of incompetence. It was, you never really can remove sort of human frailty from the picture, no matter what the image or perception of something like the CIA is. You started off referring to it as, people do have the image that they think of Pierce Brosnan or as 007 or Sean Connery. That's CIA, this spy business. And I don't know if you're familiar with the cartoon Dilbert, but it's CIA is more like Dilbert than it is about 007.
That's too funny. So, okay, so the last few years, you've been speaking out against bad U.S. foreign policies. So while that's really fantastic from the human perspective, so how so how does the establishment view you and treat you? I mean, is the old CIA and the State Department guys, are they mad at you? Do they give you a phone call and say, "Hey, man, stop speaking out"?
Well, so I'm in sort of a unique position. There are not a lot of, let's call them pundits out there that have my background and diversity of experience, because I worked on the operations side of the house at CIA, so I have exposure to that. I have friends in that community. I worked as an analyst. Then I moved to State Department and dealt with the policy side of the house, but from a terrorism perspective. And in that capacity, I dealt with maritime security, aviation security, anti-terrorism assistance training for countries around the world, and was involved with as the FBI investigated the Pan Am 103 bombing. I saw how law enforcement investigations unfolded in the international arena. Then when I left government in '94, I was given the opportunity to become a TV talking head when Carlos the Jackal, Ivan Ilyich Ramirez, was captured in Sudan in, I think it was August of '94. I was invited to go on CNN and talk about it. And I guess I have a gift for gab. I got in trouble in elementary school for talking too much, but now it serves me well. I went on air, and then as a result of that, I became very, whenever there was a terrorist incident of any kind, I was on television. I was on ABC, CBS, NBC, and going into the new year, the actual from December 31st to January 1st, going from '99 to 2000, when there was all the concern about Y2K, I was the NBC News terrorism expert. And so they had hired me. The only way to go to Times Square, because you got to sit up on a hotel balcony and look out on the crowd below. That was fine. So I was accepted in the establishment media back then. I debated Alan Dershowitz on CNN with respect to the Wye River Peace Agreement back in, was that 98, 99? Katie Couric was interviewing me when the third plane hit the Pentagon on 9/11. They called me up and said, after the first two planes hit, and said, Katie wants you on air. But when my problems started in November of 2002, I was a Fox News analyst. I was one of their paid guys. It was like $50,000 a year, which, not bad for just, flapping your gums. And I was on the Hannity and Combs show, and the issue came up of the United States going into Iraq and invading Iraq. And I said we were not in a position to fight a two-front war, and that invading Iraq would be a mistake. Well, it turns out that Roger Ailes, who was still alive at the time, heard that, and he sent word down and said, I don't want Johnson on air anymore. So I had a contract. They fulfilled the contract. I give Fox credit for that. But the only one who actually had me on his show was Bill O'Reilly. He had me a couple of more times, but they just stopped calling. And so the contract ended. And then I started hearing from friends inside the CIA that this entire excuse for invading Iraq, and remember, this was back in 2003, was completely bogus. It was made up. There were no weapons of mass destruction. In fact, that's, my friend Valerie Plame, and Valerie Plame Wilson at the time, I didn't know. She was directly involved with that, but I had other friends. So I began speaking out. And actually, initially, the Democrats loved me. Even though I was considered a conservative Republican, the Democrats had me do their national radio address one Saturday because I was supporting Valerie Plame and fighting back against the Bush administration's efforts to smear her. But when Barack Obama came into office, and I was a critic of Barack Obama, that was the kiss of death. And so all of a sudden, I was no longer welcome. But I've been a critic both of Republicans and of Democrats, and just step back and take an objective look that the problem with America is we've got a lot of very good people, average folks that are true patriots, but we have an incredibly corrupt system. The system is perverted. It is one built on war, and just the language that's used to try to create narratives makes it impossible to actually have a rational discussion. For example, can't talk to Hamas because Hamas is an international terrorist organization. They're terrorists. And so I've been hearing that, and I had really never looked deeply into Hamas. I just sort of went with the superficial, okay, yeah, they're a terrorist organization. So I started looking at the numbers. Now, these are not my numbers. These are published by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Okay, it's on their site. So these are Israeli numbers. This is not Larry Johnson opinions, Larry Johnson interpretations. From the year 2000, all of 2000, until April 26th of 2024. So we're talking almost 23 years, 4 months. The total number of Israelis that died in terrorist attacks that are attributed to Palestinian violence, 1,455. Now that's about 60 a year total. And of those, how many were Hamas? Where they said these were Hamas attacks? Only out of 630 incidents that they record, 105 were attributed to Hamas. That's why I say Hamas, if anything, is, quote, third-rate terrorist organization, but it's not a terrorist organization, because when you look at the actual incidents, for example, in 2023, in 2023, leading up to October 7th, there were a total of 18 violent incidents in which Israelis were killed. The total of 19 victims, 7 military, 12 civilian. Well, during that same period, there were 66 Israelis murdered by other Israelis. Okay. So I'm saying, boy, it's more dangerous to be an Israeli than it is to, be facing off against the Palestinians. But these attacks, what they listed were basically shooting ambushes of people in the West Bank. That was the majority of it. What you have is you fight over land, and you've got Israeli settlers killing Palestinians. In fact, when I went back and looked at the numbers, okay, that's since 2000, 1,455 Israelis have been killed. How many Palestinians were killed? 8,000.
Wow.
So already you're looking at a factor. Israelis are killing Palestinians more frequently, by a factor of 4 over the last 24 years.
Right. And then,
so don't tell me Hamas is this massive terrorist organization. It's a lie. It's designed to create an emotional reaction in people in order that you can't sit down and objectively and fairly assess the situation. That, yes, Hamas may have a religious motivation in part for what it's doing, but what they're really doing is they're fighting for land. And the Israelis are fighting for land, and that's the intractable struggle right there.
Yeah, right. And then, there's this whole, the power difference and who controls who,
Oh, yeah.
The apartheid system, the open air, the concentration camp. So there's no, because, like if you look at the international laws, it says that people have the right to fight back the occupiers.
Yeah.
So you cannot really call them as terrorists.
And then the October 7th attack that was, characterized as, worse than the Holocaust. I mean, for God's sake, that dishonors the victims of the Holocaust, what was a real attempt to exterminate Jews in Europe. This is both absurd and obscene because it wasn't a terrorist attack. It was a military operation, a well-planned military operation. The Hamas had 2 objectives. One, to attack and destroy Israeli military bases that are on the periphery of Gaza. Well, they did that. They wiped out a significant number of the Golani Brigade, which is one of these elite Israeli units. And their second objective was take as many hostages as possible because there were so many Palestinians that had been illegally arrested, thrown into prison, not presented with any kind of due process, not presented with any kind of charges, and were subjected to torture. So, you know what? If I was in the Hamas position, I probably would have done the same thing, candidly. And you know, they leveled a significant defeat upon the Israelis. And then
Yeah.
the lie started that, oh, they killed 1,200 people. Well, you got the pictures of the 1,000 burned, blown up automobiles. Hamas didn't do that. That was done by the Israeli Air Force shooting at people who were driving away from the scene of that rave in the desert, that, you know, music party. And yeah, in many of those cases, Hamas fighters were driving the cars, but there were Israeli hostages inside those cars. They died. They were killed. So we don't know exactly the number of Israelis that were killed by Israelis, but a significant number. We also have testimony from other Israeli witnesses from in the kibbutzim,
Yeah.
where there were in one particular instance, a couple of Hamas fighters were holed up in a home and had 17 Israeli hostages. The Israelis with the tank blew the house up, killed all the hostages, including a baby.
Wow. Yeah. I
And
mean, what do they call it? The Samson option.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Terrible. So,
yeah,
what do you think is going to happen? So, is this the final solution for Gaza? Are these people going to be well expelled from Gaza forever, or well, is there some possibility that the Palestinians might be able to return back to the Gaza Strip?
we're not going to go back to you know, the status quo ante, you know, what it was before. Um, oh, I'm not sure how it's going to work out for this reason. Israel is in real economic trouble. So their ability with Turkey cutting off trade is the, you know, one blow, and hopefully Turkey continues, cuts off the oil, cut off the flow of oil to Israel. Israel's done; they're toast. The Houthis have effectively shut down the Red Sea, so that no maritime traffic is getting in and out of Israel. So Israel can't survive in that condition for long, and they don't have this all-powerful military. They're really struggling. I just seen some videos today of there were 3 Hamas fighters pop up out of a tunnel in a courtyard. There are 2 Israeli tanks parked. They've got these large, you know, the probably about a 30-pound. It looks like a 30-pound dumbbell, but it's an explosive. They get out of the ground, they run over, they put these under the tanks. You can see Israeli soldiers. They're with an eyesight. They're looking in the other direction. They don't see these guys. And then one fires an RPG, and they run back. They blow up the tanks. So, you know, you've got that kind of that's going on. The Hamas is not stopping, and I'm not sure how long Israel can continue to sustain casualties like this, because you know, in previous instances, as we pointed out, over a 24-year period, the average number of Israelis that were dying in terrorist attacks was 60 a year. And their annual murder rate exceeded that. So it was, I'm not trying to minimize that loss of life, but it's not the same as when you're taking, you know, they've taken 700 casualties, KIA, Israel, in the last 6 months. That's over, you know, 100 a month. That's pretty steep for a small country of 10 million people. Then when you look to the north to what's happening with Hezbollah, I'm not sure Israel's good. Israel wants to take control of Gaza. They want to expel all the Palestinians, but I think they're going to fail in that. But it's going to still create the devastation that's taken place in Gaza it would literally take years to repair. And so this is, we're in some uncharted waters, and they're very dangerous, frankly.
Yeah. Somebody was saying that the biggest mistake that the U.S. did in the 2000s was to get snared in the Middle East and waste trillions of dollars. And then the U.S. took the eyes off China, and they totally missed the rise of China because they were so busy fighting Iraq and bombing Yemen and Somalia, Libya, Syria, blah, blah. So, but now it looks like the US could be drawn back into the Middle East and spend another few years wasting trillions of dollars, losing the soft power, and not focusing on the things that they should be focusing on regarding China.
Yeah, I think my country, I'm sad to say, is the most pernicious influence in the world today. It's the most disruptive. It's the most dangerous. It's the most corrupt. We had the opportunities that have continually presented themselves. And let's be candid. Let's go back. You go back into the 1950s. Okay, so I was born in 1955. It makes me really old. That was really the start of U.S. intense activity to promote regime change around the world. Two of the most prominent examples back there were the overthrow of Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala and Mossadegh in Iran. And why did we get rid of Mossadegh? We wanted to say, oh, he's a communist associated with the Soviets. No. He was limiting Western companies from exploiting the oil resources. Okay, this is all about the money. And then we, go through Vietnam. At that point, the United States starts backing the French in Vietnam, a colonial empire. So we become the enablers of colonialism and the oppression that has accompanied that. The United States record of promoting regime change, whether it's in Vietnam or Chile or Panama or the Dominican Republic or Haiti, or, we go down the list, long list, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. The United States is the one that's out promoting war. We always blame it on others. Like, oh, those Chinese, man, look, that Chinese is an imperial power. Really? How many countries has China invaded militarily since 1979? Well, the answer is one. That was Vietnam, because Vietnam had attacked Cambodia, and the Chinese lost that. So we don't have a record of China engaging in these regime change operations overseas. How about those Russians? Yeah, Putin wants to recreate the Soviet Union. Please. Again, how many other countries has Russia invaded? Well, they're fighting in Ukraine now because basically NATO did everything in its power to provoke that, and provoked a reaction from Russia, which I guarantee you, if Russia had done the same thing in Mexico that we were doing in Ukraine, the United States would have invaded Mexico. So, I don't want to hear this, fake outrage about how aggressive the Russians are. And then the Russians were attacked by the Georgians in 2008. Other than that, Russia, since the end of the communist regime, has not been out engaged with regime change overseas. It's the United States. We're trying it now in Georgia. We tried it in Kazakhstan. Oh, and how about India? You guys have a real problem. And your problem is this. You're not bowing and scraping to your white masters over here in Washington, okay? You may have got rid of the Brits, but now we're in charge. You do what we tell you to do. Well, not surprisingly, many of the people in India are going, who the hell are these Americans? They need to, hey, mind your own business. If we want to buy cheap oil from Russia, we'll buy cheap oil from Russia instead of buying expensive oil from you and putting money in your pockets. So, I mean, it's just what's happened is the United States enjoyed trying to run the world and to be in this hegemonic power, unbridled, out of control. And we came that our only tools were sanctions or war. Sanctions or war. Do what we want, or else we'll sanction you. And if you're really bad, we'll go to war with you. How about diplomacy? And, and it actually, this goes back even into World War II. Because if you think about it, the United States justified dropping bombs on atomic bombs on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because, if we didn't do that, we'd lose, millions of soldiers fighting, trying to take those islands. So that was our only option. And I've been raised with that. And then all of a sudden you step back and you realize, well, wait a second. Then the Soviet Union, Stalin had promised, hey, when we finish with the Germans, we'll come help you fight the Japanese. They had kept cordial relations with the Japanese up to that point because they didn't want to fight a two-front war. Stalin, at least, wasn't crazy. But the United States was real slow in encouraging the Soviets to do that. And you know what? If the Soviets had actually started their offensive against the Japanese in Manchuria and into China, because once they did it, they wiped them out pretty quick. That war could have been ended much quicker without having to drop the atomic bombs. But I believe part of the purpose of dropping those atomic bombs was, one, to put the Russians on notice, the Soviets on notice. Look what we got, and you better not mess with us because we're in charge. And so once you realize that there's other ways to view the world and step back, that's why I say the United States is, we like to portray ourselves as a force of good, promoting democracy and freedom. It's a lie. It's a lie.
Yeah. Like somehow the DNA of the British Empire, but it got transported to Washington, D.C. And then they've been kind of running along with that, the imperialist fantasy.
Well,
So,
tell that to the Native American tribes that we've, I don't want to pretend that the Native American tribes were living in some sort of utopian paradise before European settlers arrived. They were warring amongst themselves and killing each other too. But the United States, taking over the Wild West, the whole mythology surrounding that was basically a little bit like what's going on in Israel right now, with the European settlers displacing and taking land away and homes away from the people who had lived there long before we arrived.
It's true, yeah. But I was referring to like the global empire,
Yeah.
And so as I think that probably started in like the late 19th century when the U.S. leaders, they started, fantasizing about, hey, so let's start a war with the Spain. And then the Spanish War led to the U.S., get the Guam and the Philippines. I think they got a taste of that. And then when the World War II, the European empires, they all collapsed. It was the perfect opportunity for the U.S. to become the global hegemon.
Right.
But I think the multipolarity is the natural form, the natural state of the world. And the U.S. has to get used to that, and it has to figure out a way to work with the other great powers like Russia and China.
Well, and India in that regard. I mean, look,
India.
India's now the largest country in the world in terms of population, exceeding that of China. And it's a very dynamic economy as well. I mean, it got a little ways to go, certainly because of the amount of poverty in the country. But we got to get into a world where no one country gets to tell every other country what to do. All right, that's what's sort of so disgusting about American policy, because we've enjoyed being the dominant power because by virtue of the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. So we've made it such that if you don't do business and stuff, we're going to keep you from doing business. Well, that's just, that's a lot like those, company-owned towns. There were towns out in the west of the United States that were like a mining community. Well, the owner of the mine, he owned the store, he owned the saloon, he owned the hotel, he owned everything, and so you had to do what he said. And oh yeah, I'll give you some credit, but then there was interest tacked on. You had no control of your lives. People want to have some control, and part of what's going on right now in the West is insistent that its vision, its woke vision of the world, has to be imposed upon everybody else. So our promotion of homosexuality, the rest of the world's got to get on board with that. And frankly, the rest of the world's a pretty conservative place and rejects that as a lifestyle. I mean, they're not necessarily going out and killing homosexuals in the streets, but don't tell us that the LGBTQ community is normal, because it's not. And when people say, to say that, I'll be attacked, but it's it's not normal. The normal is for families with male and female, and the production of children out of that relationship.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons the West hates Russia, because Russia has become a sanctuary country for people with traditional values with respect to family.
Yeah, I think Putin built like 10,000 churches and monasteries over the last 2 decades since he came to power. And I mean, like he actively encourages families to have more children. He banned the LGBTQ propaganda to children.
Right.
And he does a lot of things. And but those are the foundations of a society, and people are not able to think. So I think this has been done very deliberately by a small group of the cabal in the US and like in Europe to destroy the society, to destroy the families, to remove God from schools. And it's just a very, very gradual process of the destruction of history, religion, values,
Right.
all the foundations of what make a good society.
Yeah, it is. Again, different countries, and there were so many different religious movements and beliefs, and but within most of them, there's this core belief of a relationship, of a divine relationship between the person and the deity, and within that, you carry the notion of that the person is sacred, that human beings, not every person, should be treated as something sacred, something special. I mean, if you have that as sort of your belief system, then it changes how you deal with people. Because if instead you don't believe that there's anything special about people, if you don't believe that they have been invested by God or by whatever deity you worship with these characteristics that are godly, then it's easy to kill them. It's easy to starve them. It's easy to jail them. But when you have to start recognizing the value of each person, you know, regardless of what their outward appearance is, but that each person has value, then, you know, that takes you in an entirely different direction. And unfortunately, what is the philosophy that's now dominant in the West treats people as, you know, as Pink Floyd, Roger Waters and his group sang.
Just a
All
brick in
we
the
are is
wall.
another brick in the
Brick in
wall,
the
baby.
wall.
Brick in the
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah. We don't need no education.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't need no thought control. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened to rock and roll people like that? I mean, so now you listen to music, it's just complete trash. Like there's no thinking, there's no rebelling against the man, the establishment. Instead, it's just, like hedonism. It's just,
Well,
it's just
yeah.
more stupidity and degeneracy.
Yeah, that is the um, you know, I've watched some videos on human trafficking, and unfortunately, in certain parts of the world, like in Thailand, for example, um, you've got these Westerners who show up in order to engage in sexual relations with children, and you've got locals in Thailand who sell their children to do that because of and the children will do it out of an obligation to uh, serve the family. I mean, it's really it's a level of evil, so fundamentally wrong. But I've had personal experience seeing that here in the United States. Not to suggest that those parents in Thailand, boy, they're degenerates, but we in America, we're on the upwards. We're morally superior. I was involved as the assistant director. I was asked to come in and be the assistant director of a summer youth camp that was sponsored by a church. And the reason was they needed somebody to impose control because the previous year the kids were just out of control. And so, I believe in setting limits and, defining the boundaries of what you can do and what you can't do. And if you walk outside those boundaries, there are consequences. And they brought in these kids from a part of the city of Baltimore. And there's a neighborhood in Baltimore that is called Pig Town because it's where they used to slaughter pigs. And that part of Baltimore is largely white, Caucasian. And we were forewarned about some of the kids that were, one 11-year-old boy was described as extremely sexually promiscuous. And the story, what we learned was his mother started turning him out as a male prostitute at the age of 8. Now think about that. When your own mother is putting you out on the street to be sexually abused by other men in order to get money so she can feed her drug habit. I can't think of anything more horrific. I mean, it's mind numbing. So, I've seen that up firsthand. And having met the kid, it just breaks your heart because you could see, although the kid was damaged, you could still, let's say, sort of see the light of God in his eyes. And it was just, nightmarish, absolutely nightmarish.
Yeah. I mean, there are just so many statistics bad about the US, in terms of the physical health, mental health, poverty, suicide rate,
Oh,
and
hell,
just
let
like,
me give you one. Let me give you one because this came out as I was looking at the terrorist attacks in Israel. So Israel's a country of about 9.5 million people. Chicago is a 2.75 million. So, almost 1/4 the size of Israel. So during that same period from 2000 to 2024, April 20, or actually 2023, just went through the end of the year. I looked at the murder statistics, almost 14,000. you, you know, 10 times the number of victims that were caused by, alleged Palestinian terrorists. And yet that's in just this one city alone. We're getting that kind of loss of life. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you'd be safer as a openly declared Hamas fighter in Israel than you would be as a black man in Chicago. Okay. You'd be safer over there than you would in Chicago. But I didn't go on to look at the stats for New York City or Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia and
Baltimore.
Atlanta and Detroit and Baltimore. And so when we go down the list, it's ugly. And the United States has become sort of inoculated against, oh, well, let them kill themselves. Except the problem is, as long as it was just minorities dying, it was okay. They're in that part of town, they're animals, then when it starts creeping over into the white neighborhoods and the non-minority neighborhoods, all of a sudden people go, whoa, wait a second. So Ronald Reagan always liked to talk about the United States as in the terms of the prophet Isaiah, a city on the hill that the world would flock to and see as an example. Boy, everybody look at the United States now and say, well, we don't want to do that.
I know, it's so sad, because on one hand, they say, like you talk to these people, they'll say, oh, we'll never go bankrupt because we can just print trillions and trillions of dollars. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you can print trillions and trillions of dollars, why doesn't the US look like a beautiful country, right? So
Yeah.
like you should have these like really amazing cities, very clean roads. There should be no homeless and no druggies and no crime. And there should be just, bullet trains and world-class subway trains. And, so you should just like, show one picture of a city in the US. And then people should say, wow, this is like the best city I've ever seen. But then the reality is like, you take a look at, so I went to China 4 years ago. And it just like blew my mind away. And I've been to the US, and like there's no comparison now. You look at the Chinese cities, the infrastructure, the high tech stuff is just like really better than the US. But it should not be the case when you have so much money, you have the dollar reserve status, and the US should be able to make friends very easily with that kind of money, right? So like you go to Gaza, and then Biden says, hey guys, I'm going to spend $5 billion building amazing hospitals and schools and colleges for the Palestinians. And then those people will love America. Right? So it should be like very easy to make friends. And then, like same thing with, say, the Ukrainians. Like rather than giving $50 billion or $100 billion of weapons to fight Russia, if the US just gave $50 billion to build Ukraine and to bring peace between Russia and Ukraine, the whole of Europe will be better off, and Ukraine will be better off, Russia will be better off, but the whole world will be better off.
Yeah, no, the policy of the United States, it's been self-destructive. If we just took even a fraction of the money that we spent in these foreign wars of choice in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, and had invested that here in rebuilding infrastructure, and ensuring that really part of what's leading to the destruction of the education level in the United States is the destruction of the nuclear family. And where kids are not able to grow up in a safe environment, and then the hedonism, the drug abuse has been rampant, and it's very destructive. You try to, it is important to, on the one hand, to have freedom, but then when people take that freedom and then destroy themselves and destroy their families and their neighborhoods in the process, they're sort of paying the consequences of it. So you're right. World could be a different place if the United States was in a mindset to really promote human development. But we've paid lip service to that because everything we've done in Ukraine has been designed to provoke a war with Russia, and we've succeeded. Except, we provoked a war we can't win. We've awakened a sleeping giant in Russia, and much the same way that the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor awakened the sleeping giant that was America back then.
So I wanted to ask you about that. So that will be the last topic for now about the Ukraine war. But I hope you would come back and join us sometime in the future, because
sure.
I want to discuss the shenanigans of the CIA. Like whether
Sure.
it is the assassinations, the coups, JFK, drug trafficking from the Golden Triangle in Laos, Cambodia, the support and working with the Nazis during the Cold War, the Operation Paperclip, and then the Nazis in Central America, where you worked, and the mind control programs like the MK Ultra. So there is so much I want to talk about. So maybe we can dedicate one show just for the CIA.
All right, sure. Well, we'll do it. I may be boring, but I'll be happy to try to talk about it.
Okay. So for now, one last question that I've been struggling with myself as to how is the Ukraine war going to end? Because I cannot see Russia lose, because this is like an existential crisis for them. But I cannot see the US and NATO lose either, because that will be a huge blow to the prestige of the American empire and the NATO. And I don't think they can allow that to happen. So where do you think this situation will be, or will it be like a stalemate, kind of a war of attrition for a long time, or what will happen?
Okay, so you're in India, you're a chess player, right?
Yes.
I mean, chess was born in India. Okay, what is a stalemate? A stalemate means neither side can make a move and to benefit itself and disadvantage the other. Well, that's certainly not the case of what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine has no moves left. It has no moves. Russia has all the moves. Russia has the queen, the rooks, the bishops, the knights. All Ukraine's got is, this little cocaine-infused comedian that plays a piano with his penis. Okay, they don't have air power to speak of. They've run out of missiles. They don't have air defense systems. They're begging, trying to borrow those, and no matter what they get from the West can't produce enough missiles to sustain those systems. But most importantly, they don't have the manpower to fight. So they're going to lose. And they could lose, the war could end as soon as end of June. It may drag on a little bit further. I don't see it going on any beyond December, because already the lights are out in Kiev, Lvov, and Kharkov. They're having to shut off all electrical power for at least right now 3 to 6 hours a day. Well, that's okay now that it's coming into the late spring, early summer. But by God, come winter, that's not gonna that dog won't hunt. They won't be able to survive. So the growing unrest that's showing within the ranks of the leadership of Ukraine. Here in the last week, the Russians have now started their offensive up around Kharkov, and they're also coming in via Sumy. They could conceivably rush their troops again to the outskirts of Kiev, only this time they're not going to withdraw. And the revelations, this is coming from Ukrainian press. This isn't, Russian press, but from the Ukrainian press itself, which is under the control of the government. They're acknowledging that hundreds of millions of dollars were paid in contracts to build defensive barriers up north around Kharkiv. None of them were built. The people, yeah, we built them. Give us the money. They got the money, took the money and ran. Maybe they bought a Swiss chalet or something down on the French Riviera, and they got a yacht, God knows what. But the money certainly didn't go to building bunkers and trenches and to benefit the Ukrainian troops. So what's happening? Russians are coming across. They're not encountering any obstacles, no minefields, no dragon's teeth. So Ukraine's going to lose. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And as far as when goes, this is not going to be drawn out. This is not we're not looking at a struggle for many years. Well, that's nonsense.
So you don't think that NATO troops are going to go to Ukraine to save the country?
The same NATO right now that has run out of artillery shells, the same NATO, then catch on to this statistic. NATO in 1 year, they produce as many tanks in 1 year as Russia does in 1 month. Okay? The armies of France, the United Kingdom, UK's got 70,000 soldiers, tops. Hell, that's not even enough fans to fill one of their football stadiums. Okay, so yeah, they talk. Oh, yeah, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. What are they going to do when they get there? They don't have the ability to sustain a combat effort beyond 2 weeks. They're going to run out of ammunition. They don't have an industrial base to produce it. Russia does. Russia's got trained troops. The rest of the NATO countries, their troops, the training is sporadic. I mean, it's uneven. Some countries are better than others, but it's like trying to field a professional soccer team. Only the soccer team, so you're going to play at a professional level. Only the soccer team's got some, tiny little kids that are just learning how to play. And then it's got some teenagers, and then it's got both teenage boys, teenage girls. And then, hey, we can't forget the handicapped. We've got to have, those who are in wheelchairs. So that's your team. All right. You going to win the World Cup with that? No, you're not. Okay. So that's what NATO is going up against Russia in this endeavor. Whatever desire they have to try to insert troops, it would just simply, it'll widen the war.
So,
I think, well, let me just say, I think one of the reasons Putin is in China right now, when moved earlier to his meeting with Xi, they're discussing that Putin is, I think, laying out, said, hey, I want you to be aware this is what we're likely to do if this persists, if they continue to kill our civilians. And it gets Xi's blessing. So, yeah, we're with you. We can't allow the West to do this to us.
So what sort of the negotiation or the treaty will happen at the end? Will it be like, okay, Russia, you get to keep those 4 regions, and Ukraine will not join NATO? What sort of the agreement will happen? Will Russia get to go all the way up to Odessa? What do you think will be the final piece?
No, well, the person negotiating the end, the surrender, will be Russia. It's not going to be NATO. It's not going to be the UN. It's not going to be some third party. It's going to be Russia. Russia will be dictating the terms. And the Ukrainians, their choice would be to sign or die. Surrender or die. Real easy. You know, because Russia tried the negotiation route. They trusted the West with the Minsk agreement, only to learn that that was a complete fraud foisted upon them, and that the West had no intention of abiding by that agreement. They negotiated by the end of March of 2022 a tentative peace agreement that would have settled this conflict in Ukraine and stopped, protected the Donbass, the people of the Donbass. But again, that was sabotaged by the West. And as a consequence of that, I got probably at least 600,000 dead Ukrainian men. That's going to affect the population trends in that country for, generations. So, no, I don't see Russia's, they're going to, just as it happened at the end of World War II, they're going to dictate the terms.
So it's going to be, okay, so Ukraine cannot join NATO, and there has to be some sort of the demilitarization and
right.
The
They'll have a national police force, but they're going to be denied access. One of the bargaining chips that Russia may use is say, okay, we'll give you access to the Black Sea, but under these conditions. And it'll be up to the Ukrainians to decide whether to accept those conditions or not. I think Russia very well may incorporate and make Kiev a permanent part of Russia. Because if you go, if you understand the history of Russia, what they call the Kievan Rus, the Russians' status as a Christian country began in Kiev in 989 AD. Oh, good Lord, that's more than 1,000 years ago. So when you got that kind of history behind you, you're not one to walk away from it and pretend that it's some foreign entity.
Then Ukraine owes a lot of money to BlackRock and all these other companies who are saying now, hey, we cannot wait for the war to be over.
Pay us now.
Yeah.
No, they ain't getting paid.
Yeah.
They ain't getting paid. That's they made a bad investment. They decided to play strip poker, and now they're naked.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So we can talk for like another 5 hours, but we don't have the time.
Yeah.
But the next time, I certainly want to chat with you a few more times. But the next times, I want the topics should be very, very specific. So
sure.
We can pick one topic and then we can go really deep into it.
That'll be fine. I would look forward to it.
Awesome. Mr. Larry Johnson, thank you so much. We really enjoyed it. And thank you for sharing your wisdom. And we hope to see you back again.
Thank you. Thank you for staying up so late to talk to me.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.